Hi, welcome to Parenting the Adlerian Way. I'm your host, Adlerian family counselor and parenting expert Alyson Schafer. Each week, I answer your burning parenting questions to help reduce the stress of parenting one tip at a time. We'll explore Adlerian psychology together and learn methods of child guidance for raising a happy, confident, capable, resilient child. Hi, it's Alyson. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a guest, Margot Denomme, who's going to be joining me for a conversation today. Very timely because May is actually Mental Health Awareness Month. And Margot, as I introduce you, she's the founder of Raising Awareness About Digital Dangers, RAADD. And she brings a very unique perspective to this topic because she's got 26 years of experience as a Crown attorney. And from that vantage point, she has had a firsthand experience of seeing how low self-esteem and social media can harm our children. And that leads to mental health issues, bullying, and results in legal troubles, which is, I guess, where it comes to you. And so I thank you for joining our conversation today. I'm so interested to see how the legal system gets involved in this conversation. That it really is a unique take. So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing about the mental health and I'll say crisis that's happening today and how that lands in your profession.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Alyson. I'm thrilled to be here and have this discussion because it is so relevant these days and parents are so involved with trying to find solutions. And the way I became involved with this whole discussion was actually 13 years ago. And it happened when I was raising my own daughters and seeing how they were comparing themselves to people in the media that simply didn't exist. Everyone had been photo edited and filtered. And through my work in the criminal justice system and working with youth, I often found that it was easy to look at a child's behavior and react to that behavior and be critical of the behavior. But when you started to peel back how the child came before the justice system, it was usually as a result of not feeling good about themselves, that getting involved with the wrong group, that real sense of belonging was not there. And so I thought, why don't we start to really create the dialogue and help kids understand that beauty and who you are really comes from within? So that's what started this journey as I wrote children's books 13 years ago and started to go to schools to speak to kids about this.
Wow, what a powerful message. And I know you said in our past, our paths have crossed with our parent education. And that key tenet of belonging is such an important piece of the Adlerian understanding of human motivation, of course, and within that, children's motivation. So I love that that's something that you are giving prominence to, because I think we just toss around that word a little bit cavalier and we don't realize how absolutely powerful it is as a necessity to have and what it leads us to do in order to gain it, I love that humanitarian approach that you're taking. So then of course, social media has been around for a while. My kids are probably the same age as yours and they kind of grew up with it. What's changed in those 13 years that we seem to be seeing just more and more reporting on the negative and harmful effects of our kids being on their screens?
Well, and exactly. My answer to that would be everything has changed because as you and I both know, it was very insidious in that, I remember my daughter wanting an iPod and I thought, well, that's perfect. It just plays music and I have a big clunky Walkman. So I understand how you would just want your music on this little slick player. And then slowly Instagram came in and then all of the other apps started to join. And it was very slow. This isn't an overnight happening. This was something that, we could see what was happening, but not really understanding the implications at the same time. So what happened was I started to take days off from work, to go to schools, to educate kids about self-esteem and inclusiveness and all of the foundations and the values that align with creating good little people. And what happened was after COVID, I was invited to speak at a women's talk. And the conversation had dramatically changed from self-esteem and self-image to eating disorders, self-harm, suicide ideation, predators. The online predators were soaring. After COVID, we saw such a dramatic change because the kids were online so often, had clocked so many hours that the entire dynamic had really just exploded. And that's when I realized it was time to really take action.
Wow. Wow. Have things gotten progressively worse since the pandemic, or is that like a pig in the python that we're settling back down? Or do you think this trajectory is just on the up and up and up? Do you have any predictions for where we're going with this?
Well, I'm happy to say I think the awareness is coming to a new level because there is so much action and proaction around this right now, which is fantastic. I think because kids spent so much time online, in fact, we all spent time online during COVID because we didn't have an alternative. I mean, we had to pivot our businesses towards being online. Kids had to pivot schools. So I think in addition to that, they also were subjected to so much more. I mean, disordered eating went up by 60% after COVID. So what they were being exposed to went up significantly. The online predators in the span of 5 years has gone up by 815%. These are significant numbers of where we're going. And now, unfortunately, we also have AI that we're adding to that mix. And we haven't even regulated, legislated social media. And yet now we have to figure out how we're going to incorporate regulations and legislation around AI as well.
Wow. So it feels like children are, I forget who the famous saying is, but the way that you judge the advancement and evolution of a society is by how well their children are doing. Here, I feel like they're unprotected. And yet when we see the cost that is being paid by our children, where is the governance? Where are these apps that are making these things available? Parents are only one part in that whole equation, but it really is almost mind-boggling to think that we've let it get this far, and we seem to be so slow to respond to this. We're like deers in a headlight,
Yeah, I agree. And as I say to parents, they really are parenting in unprecedented times. When we get pregnant, we get what to expect when you're expecting. And there's a roadmap. There's, things that you can understand and expect. And so when I speak with parents, I'm very empathetic to what they're going through because there is no playbook and things are coming out so quickly. And even myself, I research this every day. I'm reading about new, dangers and so that I can educate about them. But at the same time, it's a lot and it's very difficult to keep up with. So I empathize with parents.
And that was my next question, actually, is I think we do have motivated parents. I do think that you said the awareness is getting out. They are getting more of this information to realize what a serious problem, to sit up and take notice. That part has happened. But where's the gap then between the knowing something needs to be done and the doing it? Well, we'll talk about solutions, but what's a hurdle or a blind spot that parents are faced with? It's not motivation.
No, it's not motivation. And the thing is, as Jonathan Haidt says in his book, The Anxious Generation, if anybody's listening who hasn't read that, I love the way he informs us again about how gradual this change has been and how insidious this has gotten into society. But he also recommends 4 norms, and the 4 norms being no smartphones before 14, no social media until 16, phone-free schools, and far more unsupervised play, getting back to childhood. And so there's a lot of supports in Canada right now. We have Unplugged Canada, which is modeled from Wait Until 8th, which is a movement in the US.
Yes.
Again, so to answer your question, I think it's through collective action. And
Okay.
all of these groups are working together now towards collective action, which I think that's the biggest piece for parents is the awareness about where do we go? How can we support? And one being Unplugged Canada, where parents come together, they sign a pledge that they're not going to give their child a smartphone until 14, which again eliminates that your child being the only person in their class who doesn't have a phone.
Yeah, I would say that is one of the hurdles that I hear from parents, which is, but all their friends are gaming. If I don't let them be on past this time or whatever, that they're going to take a social hit because I'm going to come across as the meanie. And so there's this pressure from their children that I can't miss out, that FOMO, and parents cave to that issue. They worry about their kids socially.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it is the real thing, but there are ambassadors across Canada and they're doing an incredible job about bringing parents together. So again, that collective action, that not being the only person. And there's a huge movement right now back to landlines and back to talk and text phones. As I say, you don't need to go from nothing to access to the world, and that's what social media and that's what a smartphone with no parameters or iPads with no parameters does, is it really presents that.
Well, and I this collective action thing that I like about that too is that becomes a tool for parents also with their children, because I've said to parents, sit down with your kids and go online with them and go to these sites and say, look at these people are recommending that you don't go online until the end of grade 8. This isn't just me coming up with some wild squirrely idea in the middle of the night about how to raise you, but it really helps to give validation for some of the reasons why we're trying to implement family guardrails for their own good. And
exactly.
Yeah. And so now you've been including founding your own. I want to talk about a couple of these other collective initiatives to help parents. So can you tell me a little bit about what raising awareness about digital dangers? Like what would we find there? How is that collective action working for parents?
So what happened was, and the way that RAD was born was once I left the Ministry of the Attorney General, having been a Crown attorney for many years, I had done a presentation with Dr. Michelle Ponte, and Michelle is the chair of our Canadian Pediatric Society's Digital Task Force. She and I presented and we broke down a presentation about the physical, mental, and legal implications of smartphone use, plus online trends. And after the presentation, so many parents said, this is great information. Where do we get it? And the fact of the matter was, there is amazing information throughout Canada. Everybody's doing great work. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection, the Dove Self-Esteem Foundation, the RCMP, but it hasn't been compiled anywhere together. So I had taken our presentation and created the Family Smartphone Guide, which looks and feels like the driver's handbook.
Love it. Oh, that's great.
It was as a result of a great quote from the former U.S. Surgeon General that said, we would never give kids keys to the car without rules of the road. So it's meant to be the driver's handbook for smartphones.
I love that.
It breaks down all of the brain development and the impact on our mental health. And then it gets into cyberbullying and sextortion and human trafficking and all of the dangers, and it's written in bite-sized pieces so that parents can review it with children.
I was going to say, so is the audience the parent, the youth, or both?
Both. The idea, there's also a family contract at the end, which is one of the occupational hazards, but, to set those boundaries early for parents to say, okay, if you have a phone, it's not going to be in your bedroom overnight. And it is a privilege and it's not a right. It's my phone. I'm paying the bills. So yeah, it's meant to provide those guidelines.
Great. And again, I think kids are a little bit more likely to buy into ideas that they're reading in a print format that's been published rather than just a parent sitting down and just saying, my house, my rules, no way, which doesn't land well. I'm sure parents already know that.
We're very familiar with the eye roll.
Yeah, exactly. And so now there's some other initiatives too. Tell me a little bit about this 5.2 project.
So the 5.2 project is that is through Rogers Screen Break, and they have come together. They created a documentary about 3 teenagers who the average time a teenager spends on their phone is 5.2 hours. That's what the statistics say. So the documentarian followed 3 children all throughout a day to show what they were doing, how often they were on their phone, whether it was at a bus stop or walking down a hallway or wherever they were. And then they sat down with the parents to show them just how long and how often their children were on the phone during that day. So again, it's a conversation to be had about. It's one thing to hear about 5.2 hours or 7.5 or whatever the statistic is in your home. It's another thing to actually see the results. And as I look at it, it's 5.2 hours of childhood. And I think that's the most troubling because we're not getting that time back.
So true. It's so true. And so there's tools and resources too that Rogers has created to go along with that documentary to try to again support parents as they face this issue with their families.
That's right. So it's really raising the awareness about, I think, intentional use of technology is really what the discussion is about 5.2.
And what about what they're doing online? My kids and I joke that like my phone looks nothing like my children's phone. It's hardly the same device, I mean, if you go to my phone, it's like you're going to get a whole lot of meditations and recipes. It's like, gee, Mom, your algorithm.
That's okay.
My phone's a pretty happy place, actually. So it isn't just that you have a device, and yes, that's 5.2 hours of your day, but isn't there something to be said to the quality, not just the quantity of what we're doing with our phones and how or our screens and
precisely. And I think that is a very valid point, that it is the content and it is what you're ingesting, because there is a lot. Like, we know that kids' games like Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft, as I always say to parents, predators will go where children are. So again, it's having those discussions, not just once, just like we would with stranger danger. It's early and often that we're constantly saying, okay, who are you speaking to? Because if you haven't met the person, as I say to kids, in flesh, then you don't know them. Do not assume because they say that they know your best friend, that they actually know your best friend. If you have not met that person. And a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to grades 4 to 6. And that after, saying all of this lesson, this little boy ran out behind me and he said, so from what you said, you don't think that the person that I'm playing Roblox with is my cousin? And I said, have you ever met him? And he said, no, but he told me he's my cousin. I said, he's not your cousin. Tell your parents about this person that you're playing Roblox with who claims to be. So, when I say these conversations, we can't have them often enough because, raising those red flags, understanding that when somebody is in a chat or in a game and they say, let's go into a private chat, that is a huge red flag. Just teaching all of those things, and having the ability to walk through it in not a confrontational, upset way, but a teaching.
Well, and I think about how many parents have, kicked themselves over the realization that, I just got scammed, or, that was, someone was phishing. I pride myself on catching myself, but I've been duped. They're very good at what they do. This is their full-time job. Scammers are run like any other company, looking for a profit, have, teams to report on their success rates, they have a lot of time to work on doing this well. And I think I got a pretty good executive functioning. I can only imagine if you're somebody who's trying to lure a child, I am sure that you put it up against their executive functioning and their life experience, they're going to win every time. And if we don't get in there with, giving our kids some education around these things, I said he was my cousin, it's...
That's right.
Yeah.
So on that point about education, I started to go to schools with the family smartphone guide, and the administrators would say, well, we like this practical approach. We like the content. How do we teach it? So we've just launched curriculum for it. And the curriculum goes through the physical, mental, legal implications. Plus, it's called the Whole Me curriculum. It really envelops the entire child because it brings in social emotional learning so that self-regulation and self-management and mental health, as well as digital citizenship. So it's a real combination, a unique combination, teaching about their brain development and how screens impact their mental health as well.
And that is accessible through the school system?
That is accessible. There are schools that are coming on board, school boards right now that are bringing it on because, again, to your point, about the education. It's such a critical piece. And I compare it to the fantastic work that Mothers Against Drunk Driving has done to change the culture with our children, right? And that was only through education.
That's wonderful to know that there is a model that has been successful and we're applying a different change in social norms, but we do have a successful model that we can follow to get success.
But think of how it took a while, but social norms change. Takes a while. Look at the big tobacco and all of anything that was accepted socially takes years of undoing, but we have to start somewhere. And I think educating our young people about how it impacts their brain before sleep and all of that, so that it's not just parents saying, get off your device. It's not good for you. No kid wants to hear that. But if we can explain why and help them become a part of the conversation and the solution, I think we're going to get further.
Mm-hmm. And that model of bringing kids into the conversation, we say from an Adlerian point of view that kids deserve to have a voice about anything that impacts them, to their age and ability, obviously. And this is a big part of their world. And so, yeah, we need to invite them to the table to talk to us. One of the big examples that I share with parents is that, and this actually came from doing some work with the RCMP and the sex trafficking, I was shocked to find out that most of these youth had been involved in this for up to a year with the sextortion and things before reporting it to their parents. And the fear of getting out of a troubled situation online when our parents are supposed to be our allies and our protectors and the person that you go to when you need this kind of support. And they were fearful of, I made a mistake. They told me I shouldn't do this. They're going to take away my technology. I'm embarrassed that I got in this problem in the first place. And boy, we can't be helpful if our kids don't come to us as helpers,
Exactly. Open communication is really, I remember saying to the girls, like I have two daughters, and I won't be angry. I will not be angry. You can tell me anything. And so we slowly, they developed it. They would say, Mom, we're going to tell you something, but you can't be mad. And just having that little introduction allowed me time to get myself composed, that I realized that I couldn't be mad, whatever it was they were going to tell me. And I think we need something like that. I just read something that somebody had a little green apple in the kitchen that they got at the dollar store, and the kids would put a note in there about something that they wanted to tell them. Whatever the process is in your home, having that open conversation about solutions together is so critical, because you're right. It is a very difficult time. Just like it's unprecedented for parents, it's equally as unprecedented for kids. And so knowing that their parents are their soft place to fall is such a critical piece.
And we know that that is also part of the resiliency around mental health, is to have those strong family connections, right? That you actually have an ally. No one is facing these challenges alone. What is it? Many hands makes for a light load. That is very true psychologically too. That youth are not facing these things on their own, that their parents should be seen as the ally, not the enemy.
That's right. That's right. And that, I think, is where the caution comes in around these AI chatbots, because they are very quick to make the parent the enemy. And all of a sudden, the child is having these conversations with these so-called inhumane people that are often leading them down improper paths.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another danger that's brewing, and we're learning more and more as the days go on. But it's definitely something for parents to be aware of, is to really treat those AI chatbots with a very, very high degree of skepticism.
And do you know of any cases that have come before the court? I know there was a contentious one of where they were attributing causality to the AI bot for suggesting suicide to somebody that was having suicidal ideation. Was there any legal accountability for that? Do you know?
Well, just with Tumbler Ridge, I think there's some discussions that whole how that came about was through a discussion with the chatbot as well.
Wow.
So, we are going to continue to see these types of cases coming before the courts, because it is the reality of what's happening. So again, I think it's great that they're looking to regulate and legislate and show us how they're safe, and then we can discuss using them. But right now, again, just like social media, it's on the market without any regulations or legislation around it. So I think, building that awareness about, it's just not something you can safely get for your child.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So have you I loved the 4 takeaways that John Haidt's book recommends. Do you have, your kind of down and dirty tip list that you kind of say, if you have to prioritize yourself through all the overwhelm, what are ones that are kind of our top tips that you try to make sure parents have as takeaways?
One, delay. If you haven't given your child a phone, then, or any type of social media, please look into Unplugged Canada. They're doing amazing work. It's a great way to get together with other parents to reduce that FOMO. And I think they're talking about now we have the joy of missing out, and really embrace that JOMO. The other is, if your child does have a phone, I would strongly urge you to take the phone out of the bedroom, put some parameters around it, put some guidelines around it. You can go onto the RAD website. We have contracts there that you can work out with your family. Find those phone-free times together, and these are things that you can start today.
Now, that's so doable, just to say, not at the dinner table or something, like just one.
Exactly.
Yeah, claim that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And these are things that, even if your child has the phones in the bedroom overnight, you can say, okay, I've looked at a lot of the harms that are happening right now, and so much of them are around you getting proper sleep and, keeping the predators at bay. If your child's being cyberbullied at school and you don't even know it, it's relentless if they have their phone overnight. So having that, and just say, look, 10 o'clock, I'm taking the phone. And you can have it back in the morning, but you need your sleep and you need some downtime. I strongly urge that, as you just said, phone-free times, phone-free meal times, phone-free Saturdays, and allow your child to be bored. Boredom is massive right now, to try to get because that's going to instill curiosity. That's going to, motivate so many other feelings that they haven't had to have because of the constant stimulation.
You make such a good point there, Margot. Like, you have this instant entertainment thing at your hand that we've forgotten to look at the clouds, and we've forgotten all the other things that are non-tech sources of joy in our life. I know I had Amber Mack on a while ago, and she was saying, she's, big tech expert, and her son, she said, I just really make sure that we have a lot of fun happening in a non-technological way. The bike rides, the, going to concerts, kids are actually interested in a lot of other things if you put it in front of their nose and remind them that it's exciting and intriguing,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many fun things, and that all of those experiences, back to self-esteem and self-image, that's what's going to create happy, resilient children, is those experiences, to be able to, deal with the disappointments down the road, deal with life down the road, versus just being, overwhelmed with the culture of comparison and everybody's having a great life but me, and all of those feelings that we now know social media contribute to.
Yeah. The real world is just fine as it is. People get out there and have some of it.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Well, I love that you have a good, compassionate perspective, not only on the situation that youth have found themselves in, but also that parents are faced with the necessity of having to get up to speed very quickly, and the overwhelm that they face. Is there any final words that you want to make sure get covered off to our listeners today?
I would just say protect childhood. It really goes so quickly, and it's really not something we can get back. And that, I think, is the most important thing, especially as you see your kids grow. And, at the risk of sounding old, when they say the days are long, but the years are short, isn't that the truth? Like, there's no truer words, and I will risk sounding old, but it's so true. And I just think it's such a critical time. And it breaks my heart to hear parents say, well, all we do is fight about screen time. And I
Yes.
think, as if with your teens and they're exploring and pushing boundaries, you needed another thing to fight about. So, embrace your kids, love them, and protect them, because we can get through this, but do it with other like-minded parents. It'll make your world easier.
Oh, amen to that. Yes. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so, so much for all the contributions that you have made to parents. I will make sure that I list all the links to everything we talked about, all the resources and the websites and things, so that parents have those at the ready. Again, keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. As you know, it takes a village to make a podcast, so thanks to my team, including Max Cotter, my editor and technician, as well as the crew at H2O Digital. This podcast was recorded in Toronto, Canada. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.